Thank you for coming south. Congressman Stivers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize I wasn't here in time to give an opening statement. I'd like to ask your consent to be able to read that statement before I ask questions.
I was actually thought, why don't you do an opening statement and roll right into questions?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you. I appreciate Chairman Bacchus allowing this important hearing today. You know, in these times of fiscal strain, we can save millions of dollars by simply changing the composition of our coins from an alloy to multiply American steel. And since 2006, the cost of minting 1 cent and 5 cent coins has exceeded their face value. In fact, a penny costs about 2.4 cents to mint, and nickel costs 11.1 cents to mint. And last year, the mint produced, I believe, 4.3 billion pennies and 914 million nickels, and I'll follow up with Mr. Peterson to make sure my math is correct on that. But by focusing on the content alone ignores some other issues, and I think we do need to look at issues like the overhead costs at the mint. And I really appreciate Mr. Peterson being here today. I think he has experience in manufacturing, experience in coins. That said, I'm not sure he's the perfect witness for both pieces of the testimony. He's a great witness for my bill on coins, but on the transition to the dollar coin from the dollar bill, I think this committee asked Rosie Rios to testify, who oversees both the Mint and the Bureau of Engraving. And so I wish she would have been here, but I'm glad you're here, Mr. Peterson. And I do want the folks at Treasury to understand that these coinage issues aren't going to go away, and this committee is committed to focusing on this issue. And in fact, there's a constitutional requirement for Congress to deal with coinage issues and regulate our currency. And in a study in April of 2012, Navigant Consulting estimated that we could save between $182 and $207 million annually by moving to a plated multiply steel composition for our coins the way Canada did, that Ms. Lapine talked about. They could easily co-circulate with our current coins, which hopefully would be something that we'd be able to work through with the vending machine industry. I know that's going to be an issue. I want to talk to Ms. Lapine about how that worked in Canada, and Mr. Peterson about how we can do that. But as Congress considers various alternatives to what to do on currency and how to make the coinage as efficient as we can, I hope we'll look at the Royal Canadian Mint's example of using multiply steel, a cheaper raw material that is actually more durable, and I want to talk to Ms. Lapine about that in a second, because it'll save taxpayers money. But I do think there are other issues that I want to get to over time, and that's how we can reduce the overhead at the U.S. Mint as well, and I may ask Mr. Peterson some questions about that. If that's okay, I'd like to start some questions. Ms. Lapine, do you want to talk about the cost of multiply steel versus the alloys that you were using in Canada?
With pleasure. The Mint introduced multiply plated steel for its 5, 10, 25, and 50 cent denominations in 2000. This was really driven based on a look at cost where we believe the costs are 55% of the alloy costs. And it really is changing to a material that has a steel core, so 94% of the coin on average is steel, with only 6% more expensive nickel and copper. The second part related, I think, to cost is metal and price volatility. So we recognize that there is metal sensitivities, particularly if you look at the markets over the last 6 or 7 years. By going to steel, we have reduced that sensitivity and enabled central banks around the world, treasuries around the world, to be able to maintain their budgets for coinage. In addition to the cost issue on multiply plated steel, the other benefits are related to the security around multiply plated steel, which offers a more unique and definite electromagnetic signature, which aids in vending and or cost processing machines, an ability to tailor that signal in terms of meeting the needs of a given country.
And can you talk about, because you know, the vending machine industry is something that will come up, I think, in this process, what the Royal Canadian Mint did to work with the vending machine industry to ensure that the transition was as easy as possible for them? Obviously, they have some capital replacement that happens naturally. Did you work the cycle into their capital replacement cycle, extend the notice? Tell me how that worked to help allay their concerns.
If we look at our most recent change in 2012, which put the $1 and the $2, our final high denomination coins into multiply plated steel, we started working with the vending industry in about 2008. So the issue here is to let the stakeholders know, give them an opportunity to be able to work with you at developing what the specification partially might be. So we also allowed 6 months towards the end of that period to let them calibrate the machines, and in fact made changes with the vending industry that would ensure that we didn't have overlap over our high denomination coins or the 50-cent coin in our next denomination. Absolutely critical in doing that. There's no doubt there are always costs to changing software and their machines, but we know for a fact that in Canada about 90% of the machines are already at the upper end of the software capability. So it really isn't that complicated of an issue to change the software.
And for a period of time, and I think even currently, Canada has had both multiply steel and alloy coins in circulation at the same time. Did that present any issues, and how were those issues addressed with maybe any vending machine folks or just folks in the general population?
So the vending machines are very capable at reading more than one composition in terms of material on the coins that may be in the marketplace at any point in time. And so there were no difficulties in reading both an alloy coin and a multiply plated steel coin in terms of the, I'll call it, windows of ability for the software to read those. That was not an issue for us at all.
And for the consumer, the look and feel of these coins can essentially look and feel the same as they do today, but the core is different. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is a steel core with a layer of nickel, copper, nickel on top of the steel core.
Great. And today the Royal Canadian Mint's working with several countries on a similar conversion. Can you talk to that and maybe why those countries have gone that route? It's going to get to the same point that I've been getting at all day.
In fact, New Zealand in 2006 converted all of their coins, or 3 of their denomination coins, to multiply plated steel and did an extensive review working with their vending industry, which we also helped them with in ensuring that their vending industry in their country would have a chance to calibrate and be able to understand and modify their machines. The other part of work that we do with central banks around the world, and we have completed some and we have some underway now, is working with the central bank to look at what the countries around their borders may be using, looking at the purchasing power of those countries around the border, looking at any of their trade relationships or vacation volumes of flows of coin, and making sure that we take the multiply and design that middle copper layer, which is probably the most key layer in this for EMS purposes, that we design that layer to try and mitigate any overlaps on coinage around the country. And in fact, in some cases, the work with the central bank can be a year or longer as they develop the specification for the coin to convert their coins to multiply plated steel.
Great, and I hate to use all your time. I'm out of time. I was going to ask Mr. Peterson some questions, but I will yield back and hope there's a second round.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Mr. Clay.
And with that, I'll yield the balance of my time to the gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you for yielding the balance of your time. I have a question for Mr. Peterson. You alluded to the report that's coming out in a couple weeks. Any chance you could give us a Reader's Digest version?
Sneak preview time.
Sneak preview, anything?
The report will be up here on or about December 13th. I will say that this committee has previously heard testimony that if the metal for the penny were free, we would still exceed 1 cent. On the nickel, I will say that we looked at the 29 different compositions that I mentioned. There were several promising alternatives. We look forward to continuing the R&D in the coming months and years and have an active plan teed up for 2013.
Thank you for that. Can you give us an insight into, of the penny, what percent of the current, and my math says 2.4 cents, what percent of that cost is raw material versus overhead at the mint?
Our numbers for 2012 are at the auditors right now, but they're going to come in very close to 2 cents for a total cost to make the penny in 2012. We have lowered our costs of manufacturing in the circulating business since 2009. It cost us $230 million to run our circulating business then. It cost us $180 million this year in 2012. We've cut the cost in real dollars by 20% over the last 3 years. So on the costs of the penny, the metal right now is very close to a penny. 47% of the cost is metal. Mint production costs are 35%, and then the G&A allocation is 16%.
Thank you. I yield back because there's no time left.
So in other words, you're not really yielding back anything. And I think with that, I'm actually out of time. Congressman Huizenga, are you ready to ask a question? Okay. In that case, I know, and please forgive us. It's just sort of the nature of this time of year. Mr. Stivers, did you want to continue with where you were at?
I would love to, if I'm allowed to. Thank you. Mr. Peterson, can you tell us what the output of the Mint has been over the last, say, 10 years of coins? Are you staying pretty constant with the number of pennies and nickels you're making? Are you reducing them?
Circulating production at the Mint over the last several years has been quite a volatile experience. I first joined the Mint 4 years ago, and our production in 2008 was 9.9 billion circulating coins. In 2009 and 10, in response to the soft economy, people would go into their coin jars and piggy banks and turn in those coins to pay for basics such as groceries and gasoline. And the Federal Reserve vaults are filled up in 2009 and 10, and our production volumes in those years were 5.2 billion coins and 5.4 billion coins, respectively, in 9 and 10. 2011, we saw an increase to 7.4 billion coins, and in fiscal 12, our unaudited results are at 9.1 billion coins. And of that, and it's been pretty consistent, pennies and nickels have comprised between 60 to 70% of that circulating volume.
And you talked about how you have two facilities. You have a facility in Philadelphia, and you have a facility in Denver, both in downtown, as I recall. How old are those facilities?
The Denver facility was built in 1904.
I'm sorry, how old is the manufacturing machinery and capacity, the stuff you use typically? I don't care how old the plant is, but how old is the stuff inside it that you use to make coins?
Our peak production year was back in 1999, and we made some 23 billion coins in that fiscal year in response to Y2K and the Sacagawea golden dollar. And we really ramped up our production capacity between Denver and Philadelphia then. So most of the capital equipment in those two buildings were sourced in the 97, 98, 99 timeframe.
Great. And you said you've increased the efficiency of the Mint over the last 2 years, was it, or 4 years, by 20 or 30%?
Absolutely. Our production volumes are up and our costs are down. It's the very definition of productivity.
So do you see future productivity gains outside of materials costs that you can do to reduce overhead? And I guess, the ultimate question is, do we need two facilities? And maybe we do, maybe don't. I guess I'd just ask you that question as well.
Absolutely. We see continued cost improvements possible. We've been on this journey for Lean Six Sigma 5S journey. We've got a very good manufacturing team that knows how to do this. Our plant manager in Denver came to us from General Motors. Philadelphia came to us from Ford Motor Company. I came from General Electric. We get this stuff, and we're going to continue driving overhead costs down.
Great. I appreciate your commitment to that as well. And I did think it was really interesting, Mr. Schweikert's question about licensing the Canadian technology instead of doing your own R&D. Obviously you have to do a cost-benefit analysis to see what makes the most sense. But if our friends up north would give us a great deal on their technology, that'd be great. So I hope you'll, I will encourage you to talk to them, and I'll yield back the balance of my time. I have asked a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stivers. Love the holiday tie.
Thank you. Merry Christmas and happy holidays.
Anyone else with some additional questions they would like to? Mr. Stivers.
Just one additional question. I've already asked a lot, but this is for Mr. Peterson. Mr. Weller, who's going to testify in the second panel, in his written testimony claims that the Mint's accounting inflates the cost of the penny by unfairly double charging for portions of the penny's fabrication. And I guess I didn't know, I wanted to give you, while you're sitting on the panel, a chance to respond to that since his testimony would be after yours. I figured I'd let you know. I don't know if you saw that in his testimony and if you have any response to it.
I did. A few years ago, we saw that the penny and the nickel were not bearing any of the general administrative expenses of the Mint. The circulating coins, the penny and the nickel make up 75% of the circulating coins that we manufacture, and they were not bearing any of the overhead. And we saw that, developed a new overhead allocation model in 2009. We fully communicated that through Treasury, the Office of Management and Budget, this committee, and other members here on the Hill, and we implemented that change in 2011.
I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Okay, let's continue. Gentleman from Ohio.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for your testimony. And you know, most of the second panel is about the dollar. I appreciate Mr. Weller's comments about the penny. I did appreciate your points about the overhead at the Mint, and you may have heard Mr. Peterson earlier respond to your statement about the accounting changes at the U.S. Mint, which changed the cost, listed cost and
Right.
overhead, which is assigned to the penny and the nickel. Did you want to comment on his points earlier, where he said all it was is general and administrative expenses being assigned to the penny and the nickel?
Yeah, I think the response, Congressman, is still that you have, in the situation of the penny, a ready-to-strike blank that is produced for the Mint, and all they do then is mint Abe Lincoln's head on that coin. If you look at the Navigant report from earlier this year, and they looked at some of these costs in more detail, the cost of taking the metal, melting that down, rolling it, setting it, stamping it up, setting it, delivering that finished blank was around a cent or 1.1 cents, and then we moved from that to 2.4 with the Mint cost. And I think that inflated cost, at least for the 2011 situation we're discussing, was due to the fact that the Mint reallocated their costs and looked at those GS&A costs based on the percentage of coins that were produced. And since the penny is 60 to 70% of the Mint production, they were getting a large portion of those overhead costs, when in fact that ready-to-strike blank, in our view, does not really require all that overhead that's being put on it. So that when you saw that penny cost go from 1.5 to 1.7, 1.9 now to 2.4, and who knows what it's going to be if the dollar coin costs are now distributed over a smaller number of coins. I think that's what's causing this inflation we're seeing.
Sure. And as an example of what you're talking about, the Royal Canadian Mint's production costs for their coins are actually lower on a per unit basis than the U.S. Mint. However, their volume is approximately 1/10 the U.S. Mint's. Do you have any explanation for that? And then do you have any recommendations or a prescription for increasing the efficiency of the U.S. Mint?
Yeah, I believe that the Royal Canadian Mint doesn't allocate their costs on a per unit basis, so that would be one difference. I think Mr. Peterson did a nice job of explaining how they've made some significant reductions over time. I think what was interesting in Ms. Lepine's testimony was just more broadly not looking specifically at one denomination of the penny or the nickel, but the number of the steps that the RCM has taken to reduce their overall costs of production. They instituted a $1 and $2 coin that extracted savings. They moved their nickel, dime, and quarter to a multiply steel and saved money. They moved their penny to a steel coin. They changed the size of their coin. So all these steps were a part of a whole effort, I think, that reduced their costs and their production and helped in their efficiencies.
Would you normally expect somebody with more volume or less volume to have a lower unit cost?
You would assume that the higher volume would produce the lower cost.
Kind of defies logic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. Do you have any other prescriptions or advice for the U.S. Mint of how they could do what needs done to make themselves more efficient? And if you don't, that's fine.
I think I'll probably pass on that. It's a little outside of the mission of the Americans for Common Sense to tell them.
But you do talk about the overhead in your testimony. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the, if you had any specific recommendations. I thought that was only fair.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think the point would be that a lot of this focus has been on metal content, and I simply wanted to raise for the chairman and the members of the committee that there's a second side to the coin, if you will, which is there's an allocation of costs here that plays into this, certainly with the penny and the nickel. I'm sorry that Congresswoman Maloney left. Several years ago, she submitted a question to the Mint that asked what would happen to nickel production if you didn't have the penny, and the Mint came back in response to that and said that their nickel production would double. So this whole idea that we're going to save money if we eliminate the penny really doesn't pan out. Navigant found that there's actually an $11 million cost to the Mint without the penny, because you have fixed costs that are applying to our other coins, and then you have more nickels that are being produced that are also being produced at a loss. So I wanted to just say that if you look at the RCM experience and the number of changes they made across a number of coins, I think is the way to address this holistically.
Sure. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And the report coming out of the U.S. Mint in December is something we're all going to anxiously await. It looks like my time is up. I appreciate the opportunity and yield back.